Long before the Europeans arrived, indigenous peoples were already living on the lands of North America. When Christopher Columbus and his Italian sailors landed, they thought they had reached the Indies, and so they gave the native inhabitants the name Indians. This confusion marked the beginning of a series of events that would forever change the fate of these populations. With European colonization, indigenous peoples were forced to leave their lands, being pushed westward toward the Pacific. However, the expansion of the settlers seemed never-ending. Throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, the U.S. government purchased vast amounts of indigenous land for minimal amounts and confined the native people to reservations. Today, approximately 4 million people live in these reservations, facing challenges like a lack of sanitation, poverty, disease, and crime. The U.S. government does very little to improve conditions in these communities, leaving many descendants of indigenous peoples in extremely difficult situations, without access to basic services like healthcare and infrastructure. So far, no evidence of humanoid primates or prehistoric humans has been found in North America. The first humans who arrived in America came from other parts of the world. Recent studies show that native peoples of North America are genetically similar to the inhabitants of Siberia, especially from the Altai and Mongolia regions. During the last ice age, groups of people migrated from Europe to America, crossing a land bridge that once existed where the Bering Strait is today. It's believed that these migrations happened in two big waves, separated by a few centuries. The second wave of migrants arrived around the 9th millennium BC, before the ice melted and caused sea levels to rise, submerging the land bridge that connected America to Siberia. Although these events are widely accepted, scientists still debate the exact date when the first humans began populating the American continent. Thousands of years ago, modern-day Canada was almost completely covered in ice. To escape this harsh environment, the first groups of migrants from Asia followed the Mackenzie River, searching for more livable areas. After a long journey, they reached milder regions along the border of what we now know as the United States and Canada, where the climate was better and the land was more fertile. From there, the group spread out in different directions. Some headed east toward the Atlantic, while others went west toward the Pacific. Still others moved south, settling in areas like present-day Mexico, Texas, and Arizona. As they settled in these new lands, the migrants quickly adapted to the new conditions, leaving behind many of the customs and traditions of their Asian ancestors. Over time, the different groups of migrants developed distinct cultures, influenced by the unique climates and environments of each region. By the Archaic period, Native American peoples were divided into large groups, those living in the Southwest, the East, the Great Plains, the Prairies, California, and the Northwest. Each group developed its own identity and way of life, reflecting the diversity of environments they found themselves in. The native peoples of North America shared many common traits. Each nation or tribe spoke its own language and was generally organized around clans or large families. Leadership varied. In some tribes, chiefs were chosen through hereditary lines, while in others they were elected by the people. Trade between tribes was a common practice, and this active exchange allowed different groups to specialize in certain products. Even tribes that were geographically distant maintained trade relations, exchanging goods and cultures. The official discovery of America is dated October 12, 1492, when Christopher Columbus, while searching for a route to India, landed on one of the islands in the Bahamas. The famous expedition set sail on August 3, 1492, with the ships Santa Maria, Pinta, and Nina. After a stop in the Canary Islands, they headed across the Atlantic, and on October 12th, they arrived at the island of San Salvador in the Bahamas archipelago, marking the beginning of European colonization on the continent. In the late 15th century, the Italian navigator John Cabot, serving under Britain, landed on the coast of North America in 1498. From that point on, the British began to lay claim to the continent. At the time, the land was home to various indigenous tribes, with a population of around 15 million people. During the 16th century, Spanish presence in the Americas was dominant. However, in 1588, after the British Navy's victory over the powerful Spanish Armada, Spain's dominance began to crumble, and it never regained its former strength. As a result, The colonization of the Americas was led by England, France, and the Netherlands. A key moment in this expansion was the arrival of the Mayflower in December 1620, carrying 102 Puritans to the coast of Massachusetts. This landing is seen as the formal beginning of British colonization in the Americas. The settlers aboard signed an agreement called the Mayflower Compact, which outlined their ideas of democracy, self-government, and individual freedoms. It's important to note that despite sharing some ideals, the early colonists were not religiously united nor socially equal. During the colonial period, Britain aimed to fully control the economic activities of the American colonies. The idea was simple. The colonists would send raw materials and agricultural products to the mother country, and in return, receive manufactured goods. However, despite this control, the colonies saw their own industries grow, especially in shipbuilding. Americans excelled at building ships, which boosted trade significantly. This success caught the attention of the British Parliament, and in 1750 they decided to act. They passed a law that prohibited the colonies from building ironworks and rolling mills, fearing competition. Additionally, colonial foreign trade became more restricted, leading to growing dissatisfaction and contributing to the start of the fight for independence. In the second half of the 18th century, the American colonies started to see themselves more and more as a united community against British authority. One factor that fueled this feeling was the growth of the local press, which helped spread ideas of dissatisfaction and rebellion. Merchants and industrialists in the colonies were especially frustrated with the policies imposed by Britain, which hurt their businesses. Additionally, the constant presence of British troops in the colonies only added to the general discontent. Over time, calls for independence became more frequent. In 1754, Benjamin Franklin proposed an innovative plan to create a union between the colonies with their own government, but still under the supervision of a president appointed by the British king. Although this plan didn't suggest a complete separation from Britain, it sparked a strong negative reaction from the British government. All these events laid the groundwork for the future American War of Independence. In the United States, the War of Independence is often called the American Revolutionary War. On one side were the British forces and Loyalists, who supported the Crown, and on the other were the Patriots from the 13 colonies, who declared their independence in 1776, forming a new nation. The war brought profound political and social changes to the people of North America, which is why the period of transformation that followed is known as the American Revolution in American history books. The conflict lasted from 1775 to 1783. On September 3, 1783, Britain finally recognized the independence of the United States. As part of the agreement, the new American government gave up any claim to the territory west of the Mississippi River and to Canada, which remained under British control. On November 25th of that year, the last British troops withdrew from New York. Along with the soldiers, around 40,000 Loyalists left the United States, mostly migrating to Canada. The beliefs and stories of Indigenous peoples are incredibly diverse, and their main characters are often animals like the coyote, beaver, and raven, or celestial elements like the sun, moon, and stars. Among the Wintu, a tribe from California, there's a legend that explains the marks on the moon. They say a bear tried to bite it, and that's why it looks the way it does. The Arrowcuts, on the other hand, believe that an old woman lived on the moon, busy weaving her fabrics. According to their story, she was exiled there for failing to predict the apocalypse. Today, Indigenous peoples in North America still speak about 270 languages, which are divided into 29 language families, along with 27 unique languages that don't belong to any of those families. When the Europeans arrived on the continent, the number of languages was even greater, but many disappeared along with the tribes that spoke them. Today, California is the state with the highest number of preserved native languages. In North America, there are 74 different languages, divided into 18 language groups. Some of the most spoken include Navajo, with around 180,000 speakers, Cree, with about 120,000 speakers, and Ojibwe, with around 100,000. However, many of these languages are at risk of disappearing, as only 30% of native people still use them. Today, Most descendants of indigenous peoples in the United States and Canada live in a way similar to those of European descent. Only about a third still live on reservations. These autonomous areas make up about 2% of the total land in the U.S. To access benefits meant for Native peoples, individuals need to prove their indigenous ancestry, either through early 20th century census records or by a specific percentage of indigenous heritage. Different tribes have varying criteria for determining who is part of their communities. Some, like the Pueblos and the Slatas, only accept members who have at least one parent belonging to the tribe or who have full indigenous ancestry. On the other hand, the Iowa tribe, located in Oklahoma, is more flexible, requiring only that a person have 1/16 indigenous blood to be considered part of the tribe. In this tribe, knowing the language or following traditions is not a requirement. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay updated on future videos.